Hello, friends. This is Dr. Andy with one of 365 remembrances of my students from the past. Today I'm talking about the first week of March, 2004. It was the end of the winter quarter, and I had been teaching one of my favorite classes, English 110A, Introduction to the Principles of Literary Criticism, Plato to Coleridge. On March 4th, right at the end of the quarter, I was not surprisingly giving a lesson on Coleridge, the final theorist in our class. And it was memorable to me because of the difficulty I had the day before putting together that particular lesson. I went in to class on March 4th. It was a Tuesday-Thursday morning class. And I showed my students that the relationship between different kinds of imagination that Coleridge talks about, he talks about the primary imagination that we all have, that we use to make sense of the world. When we see things that are beautiful and we notice them, that's when we use our primary imagination. He also talks about the secondary imagination, which we use as artists, as poets, as synthesists, where we create combinations that did not exist before, and that in this way we are echoing the will and the power of God to, for instance, let there be light. My day was not full of light. It was full of darkness, but it was a darkness that I did not want to let on to my students. It was a darkness that resulted in a grand act of generosity that occasions today's remembrance. And so, in addition to preparing Samuel Taylor Coleridge's Biographia Literaria, which he wrote and published in 1817, I also prepared one of Coleridge's poems that touched upon these concepts of imagination, primary and secondary, as well as his idea of fancy. And I thought I'd share with you one particular stanza that I shared with my students from his famous poem, Dejection and Ode. And this is where Coleridge explores some of his own dark moods and dark spirits. He's probably someone who would have benefited from antidepressants if they had existed during his time. As you may know, Coleridge explored other means of escaping his depression, other sorts of substances. So this is stanza 3 of Dejection and Ode. My genial spirits fail, and what can these avail to lift the smothering weight from off my breast? It were a vain endeavor, though I should gaze forever on that green light that lingers in the west. I may not hope from outward forms to win the passion and the life whose fountains are within. Those fountains may make you think of the erupting fountains in Coleridge's poem, Kubla Khan. Kubla Khan was an important poem for my father, not only because he enjoyed the imagery and the reflections on the artist's imagination, but because the poem was quoted in my father's favorite film, Citizen Kane, and therefore was an important poem for Charles Foster Kane himself. We're going to cross the street now once the traffic clears. So, I'm connecting Samuel Taylor Coleridge to May 4th, 2004, and to my father. I haven't yet brought up my student. At the end of this lesson, in which I explored Coleridge and explored dejection, I revealed to my students that after class on Tuesday, I received the phone call that I was dreading, and that was that my father, Davy Marlin-Jones, at the age of 71, had passed away from cancer. I told my students, as I was about to reveal this news, that there are some experiences that almost feel easier to live through than to talk about. And then I told them about my father's love of Coleridge and how he had passed on March 2nd, 2004. And I concluded by tying together, I'm sure masterfully, the lessons that we had learned and the lessons that I had learned from my father, especially about the importance of the imagination. He grew up in Indiana, where my father's thoughts about magic, about theater, about artistry, about books, about playwriting, well, they were not welcomed. They were not embraced in Winchester, Indiana, which is why he left first for Antioch College in Yellow Springs, Ohio, and then for New York City, and then for Washington, D.C., where I was born, and where he was both the artistic director of the Washington Theater Club and the film and theater critic for the CBS affiliate, Channel 9, meaning that I got to watch him on TV several nights a week throughout the 1970s and the 1980s. I revealed this to my students and then saw the looks of sadness and sympathy in my students' eyes before concluding class and walking out, not sticking around for questions as I usually do, because I was in no emotional state to do so. In our next class, so that would have been the 9th of March, and it might have been right up at the time of final exams, waiting for me on my desk was a card. And my student Bernadette, who was full of joy and questions and hand raising and smiles in my literary theory class, she was the spirit of the class, not a student who came to office hours, not a student like so many others who I've told you about in this series that I connected with at poetry night or a pub quiz or out in the community or at my Sunday evening office hours that I held for so many years at Crepeville, a restaurant in downtown Davis. Bernadette, she shined especially in the classroom. And then I remember that it was Bernadette who went and bought a card, wrote me a very sweet message, and then sent it around to every single student in that class. All of them signed it for me. And that's a card I still have today. It's fascinating that one act of kindness, of compassion, reaching out to someone who is full of grief. In fact, there's a line in that Coleridge poem that makes me think about how I was feeling. In stanza 2, A grief without a pang, void, dark and drear, a stifled, drowsy, unimpassioned grief, which finds no natural outlet, no relief in word or sigh or tear. Bernadette and her classmates could tell that that was the grief that I was feeling. Only Bernadette, she did something about it. When I was going through a dark time, my students, who I'd only known for 9 weeks at that time, they were there for me. Even though I have no memories of Bernadette from outside of our class, it's that memory which makes me so happy to have known her, as well as her classmates, in that literary theory class from winter quarter 2004. My name is Dr. Andy, and this is Diary of a Quizmaster. Thanks for watching the video. Here's another one for you to watch. Check out what the YouTube algorithm says you should click on next, and I'll see you next time in our next video. Bye-bye.